Instructions for accessing subtitles in a language other than English are included on our board meetings webpage as well as in the description below. Instrucciones para acceder a los subtítulos en un idioma que no sea el inglés se incluyen en nuestra página web de reuniones de la Junta, así como en la descripción a continuación.
All right. Welcome, everybody. It is Tuesday, September 13th, and this is the Ross Valley School District Board of Trustees regular meeting. It is 7:03 p.m., and I'm calling the meeting to order for this evening. We are missing two trustees tonight. Wesley has COVID, so he's been working through that for a while and was not able to meet us, and Marie's got a work conflict for this evening. So it's the three of us here tonight, Ryan and Rachel and myself. Like I said, it's 7:04, and we're here again gathered in the Wade Thomas Multipurpose Room. And before moving on, I want to just acknowledge that here in this room, we're located on the unceded ancestral lands of the Coast Miwok people of present-day Marin and southern Sonoma counties. And we honor with gratitude the land itself and all of its ancestors, past, present, and emerging. As we also do in our procedural items before we move forward with some of those housekeeping items, take a moment of our moment to reflect on this month and democracy and any type of celebrations for this month. And so this month is celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, which starts actually in a couple of days on September 15th. And not many of you know, my stepdad's from Mexico, so I spent a lot of time going back and forth to Mexico. And when I heard that it was Hispanic Heritage Month, I grew up learning a lot about the different cultural heritages between Hispanic, Latino, Chicano, Mexican American. My family on his side of the family was very much blended. And so, anyhow, it's called Hispanic Heritage Month by the National Archives. And during this time, we do honor the contributions of all peoples from Latin America with roots in ancestors in Spain, Central America, South America, and the Spanish-speaking nations of the Caribbean. This Heritage Month was started back in 1968 with Lyndon B. Johnson, and it was expanded to be a whole month in 1988 by President Ronald Reagan. September 15th is the start of the month because it's the anniversary of independence for multiple Latin American countries, including Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. Mexico's Independence Day is on September 16th, coming up, and Chile is on September 18th, and Dia de la Raza is on October 12th. So it falls within this 30-day period of celebration. I was also thinking that with right now, with the transition of the monarchy in England following the death of Queen Elizabeth, there's been a lot of recent conversation and discussions around colonialism. And since this month is celebrated a lot with the independence days of a lot of Latin American countries, it was thinking about the role of monarchy in our modern day society. It's been a conversation. Just this last year, Barbados left the British Commonwealth, and many other Caribbean countries are also thinking of following suit. And so when I think of democracy and celebrating a Heritage Month with respect to recognizing independence from a colonial past, I'm reminded of the words in the Declaration of Independence that set our democracy apart from a monarchy that holds power through familial succession, and that all are created equal, and that we're endowed with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that to secure these rights, governments, like school districts, are instituted. And our democratic system of government was created for, by, and of the people to preserve and secure our rights through a system of laws, and not kings and queens or powerful individuals. So that was a bit of a reflection for this month before we say the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you want to join me now in saying the Pledge of Allegiance, you are welcome to do so. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks. I was also reminded that the district has had internet difficulties today. So this meeting is not being live streamed at the moment, but it will be uploaded within, it is being recorded and it will be uploaded within 3 days, 72 hours, thank you, logistics here. So we're not live streaming right now, but it will be, it is being recorded and it will be uploaded within 72 hours. And the last part of our procedural items is to adopt the agenda and the time allocation. So I'm going to look at my colleagues and see if anyone has any questions with our agenda this evening and our time allocations. I'm not seeing anything from Rachel or Ryan, and if not, we can, I will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and we can go ahead and vote among the three of us. Ryan?
Aye.
Rachel?
Aye.
And Shelley, aye. All right, that is our last procedural item. We now have our agenda and we can move forward. The next item is communication. We start out, as we do every meeting, with public comment on items that are not on tonight's agenda. So if there's anybody here who would like to make a public comment on something that is not on our agenda tonight, you are welcome to do so. Come up to the podium. And I'm not seeing any. Okay, so we don't have any public comments on items not on the agenda. And now we move to board announcements. Does anyone have any announcements for us?
I do.
Okay.
So I was able to attend with Marie the Marin County School Boards Association meeting that they had 2 weeks ago. I think it was 2 weeks ago. So it was great. It was like all the trustees from every single district were all invited. And they had like a workshop where they were all discussing what everyone is doing, and they kind of held a small mini groups where we were trying to figure out ways to help each other out. So it was really a nice collaborative moment to meet other people in other districts and see what they're doing. And then I also got to go to the White Hill Middle School back to school night, so that was great. It was really nice to see all the teachers. And they were giving, they'd give a little bit of background about their personal stories, but then they would also do like mini lessons about what they're teaching our children. So I saw stuff on Thursday night, and then yesterday my child came home and said, "Hey, look what we learned to do." And I was like, I went through part of that lesson. So it was really nice. It was great. And that was all.
I also went to the White Hill back to school night, and it never ceases to amaze me that, getting a parent's perspective of what your children are doing in their classes, sitting in their seats, seeing stuff on the walls. It always hits home about what really happens when you're at work and your kids are at their work. The same way maybe you would go to work one day and bring your kid and they would sit inside your office or be around you and see what you do. It's amazing to kind of sit in their world, and it kind of ties what they come home and tell you, but it really puts you in their seat. It really puts their teachers in front of you. I like seeing the teachers squirm a little bit in front of parents, just to let them know that, we are the people behind the children that we trust in their care. And it's obvious that they care. And when you sit in those classrooms and you get maybe 10 or 12 minutes with their teacher putting their best foot forward, it really gives you a great feeling of all the work and time and money and decisions and thought and caring that the administrators and the teachers do. It's obvious that they love their job. You can't walk into that classroom and leave a classroom and not understand that they really do care. And I always just encourage the parents to go attend those things. And as a trustee, we make decisions up here for the betterment of everyone. But as a parent, it's really wonderful to get in the classroom and just kind of immerse yourself for the moment and see the work. And it's really good work, and I'm proud of it. And I didn't even do it at all, but it's really apparent that it's there. And that's one of the best parts about the year for me.
All right, and The last piece of communication is the correspondence and communication to the board. What do we have, Marcy?
We received 2 that were uploaded when the agenda went live, and we have not received any since Friday.
All right. So those were uploaded
On Friday when the agenda went live. Got it.
Okay. All right. Then we can go ahead and move into our presentation part of the evening. And our first presentation item is an update from the Deer Park Working Group, Fire Life and Safety presentation and the Pathways timeline. So we can go ahead with that presentation. We've got it projected up here, and we'll just go ahead and follow along.
All right, thank you. And since the headsets were passed out, for anybody who might need Spanish interpretation, did anybody not get a headset? Who would like one? All good? All right, are we ready? Okay. All righty, so this tonight is our 9th Deer Park Working Group update. Of course, some of our earlier meetings, we hadn't yet formed the Deer Park Working Group. So this is our 9th update to the Board of Trustees regarding our work related to the Deer Park site. And we've been working collaboratively in the Deer Park Working Group. So with us tonight, doing the presentation is Heidi and Eric up here, and then we have on our phone here is our district's attorney, Terry Tao, and also the attorney for the Children's Center, Michael Calabrese. So if there are any questions that the trustees have that any staff or members, representatives from the Children's Center are not able to answer, we do have our attorneys here this evening to do that. And so what we've been doing is with our, with the presentations, what we're doing is keeping the slide deck together from our previous. So these first 8 slides you have seen before, originally at our August 2nd board meeting, and then again at August 23rd, and they're back here again this evening. So I'll just run through them quickly, but as we have folks who are new to joining, and or if there are any questions that may have not come up during a previous presentation, so we'll have them for you to refer back to, should you wish to. And so we are working together with the Children's Center for our children, and we all know that we do work better when we're working together, and that this is a complicated situation. So regarding facility issues, education code is complicated, public code, there are a lot of moving parts and a lot of elements to all of the aspects of the work we're doing together. And so we're working through all of the items that we need to work through to get through and to the end of our preferred pathway, or a pathway, but hopefully the preferred. And so we all recognize that the existing situation needs to change. So the status quo of what we've been working through is not an option. We know that the Children's Center would like long-term occupancy stability and not a month-to-month lease. And then the district would like long-term stability as well, not knowing that there is not a risk of anything happening or litigation or any safety issues. And both entities would like to improve our working relationship. And we have identified 3 solution pathways. And so all options right now are on the table, but as we've talked about previously, we do have a preferred pathway, and that one is the either direct sale or transfer to the Children's Center. And then that way they would be able to remain occupied at that location. And then in the event that we're unable to get to that pathway, we're working on the other one simultaneously, not as actively as we're working on the preferred pathway, but we're continuing down the path. That way if we run into a bump in the road or something like that, we have the other elements from the other pathways that we can pick up and move along with as we're traveling through. And then we are continuing in our discovery. So we have kind of a long-term and a short-term approach. We're working toward a reasonable, or toward a resolution within a reasonable time frame. And we have, this next slide is just some agreements that we previously, this was identified on August 23rd as some areas of agreement, and then making progress together. So this is just going back to March 16th of our conversations, and this is just a listing of conversations and or meetings that we've had, either together as Deer Park Working Group and or with some other entities, as an example, Marin Community Foundation, Marin County Office of Ed, County of Marin, and so on. And so this takes us to our next slide, which is updated information that is brand new from here out through the rest of the slides for tonight's board meeting. And Shelley.
My turn. So continuing on, we didn't have any space on the last slide for all the meetings that we've been having working together. So continuing on those meetings, we did just recently have a meeting last Thursday of the Deer Park Working Group where we met with Marin County and Ross Valley fire staff to review the fire safety information that you will hear presented tonight. So we had an opportunity to meet with them and talk to them about the report when it came out. The rest of the meetings on this slide are upcoming meetings. We're obviously here at the 13th, and then the rest of those meetings are the ones that are scheduled out so far. The following slide is a bit of a reorganization from a prior slide that you might have seen on earlier meetings. I forget which meeting it was, but at one of our meetings, we asked the rest of the board members up here what kind of information, what documents they wanted to see in this process, as we knew we were going to be making decisions, and that we wanted to be able to have findings and do our due diligence so that we made informed decisions and we had the information that we needed when it came time to make decisions. So this is just that list. Reorganized a little bit to show which entity is taking the lead on collecting which kind of information and which documents, and a little bit of a status update. You'll see the ones that say done mainly are being presented tonight because the information, some more detailed information on the Naylor Act, which is part of how we go about deeming the property surplus, the sales process. We'll be going over that tonight. And a couple of the other pieces are in process. The appraisal, the sale appraisal, which we had an action at our last board meeting where the board members approved a not to exceed amount to get an appraisal on the property. So we are in the process of that, and we have identified an appraiser who has come in under that not to exceed number, which is great. And we hope to have some preliminary appraisal information in October, hopefully at the October board meeting, with full information from them a month or two after that, because they do have a busy schedule, so they won't be able to get that to us for probably a month or two, their full appraisal. On the 7-Eleven, in terms of 7-Eleven process, you'll hear more about that tonight on that process. But one of the things that we had talked about was managing that process. And so we do have some information on a possible person who can help manage the 7-Eleven process as we move forward. And again, we just identified that person to do process management, and we'll bring more information back to the board about that hopefully at the next meeting. The staff has also been culling through our archives, our paper archives from years long ago. And we'll be sharing what they pull out from the archives about the history of Deer Park over the years. And we've got some of that tonight that we'll have presented, and then we'll just continue to bring more of it forward as we pull that out. And we do think that'll also be helpful information for the 7-Eleven committee process. I'm going to use this term 7-Eleven, and I'm realizing we described it last meeting, but for those of you who are not familiar with Surplus Lands Act process, the reason it's called a 7-Eleven committee is in order to deem a property surplus, we have a very prescribed process that we have to go through, which you'll hear more about tonight, that has a committee that is somewhere between 7 and 11 people. So if I say 7-Eleven committee, that's the shorthand way of saying that process for deeming a property surplus, which is what you have to do before you sell it, or sometimes lease it even. All right, so that is the, we will keep this slide updated on the status of all of this information, and certainly fellow trustees, if there's something that's not on this list that come to mind that you think, oh, as we move along in our process that comes to mind and say, wait a minute, I really need to have this piece of information, we can add it to this list. So this is an evolving process and we can add that on. But hopefully that will help keep everybody up to date on where we are as we go forward. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Marcy.
Righty, thank you. And the next part of our presentation is a review or update on fire safety information. And so the documents that have been uploaded to board docs related to this part of the presentation and information for the board is listed here on the fire safety documents sheet. And so we have that listed there. This presentation, as it's linked into board docs, this presentation here, the slide deck, we have items linked within it as well. And so for anybody who would like to go to that, we do have all the items uploaded to board docs, but also in the presentation deck, which should show up as the very last item of the uploaded items. The where you see underlining, those are links to the documents that are sitting in board docs. And so as one of the parts going back to our June 14th meeting is we've been talking about doing our due diligence. And one of the areas that we've been researching and finding information is related to fire safety. So this slide here shows that we have some initial findings and a letter from our attorney, Terry Tao. And what was included within that letter back that was dated June 14th is something from Michael Baker International. And so with that, that was where we were looking at the initial areas related to Field Act requirements. Since we are the property owner, there are some elements, so going back to the reason we started having these conversations and presentations is when the Children's Center asked for a lease extension, or at least a commitment to a lease extension, because we're looking at the time back in March of being able to apply for some upgrades facility grants. And so that's what started with, as part of the grant process, the grant application itself outlined certain elements that needed to be included, and one of those was a lease extension. And given that the district is the property owner, there are some elements given that the property is Field Act compliant, then it triggers Field Act compliance as well as DSA. And so with some of the upgrades, we needed to learn and understand more about what might be triggered if any upgrades were to occur or are to occur on the property, as long as it is owned by the district. And so that was the initial information that was provided back in June. And then on June 15th, there was a pressure test of the hydrants, because it was reported in the Michael Baker International that there may be some issues around the hydrants. So there was an initial pressure test. And then we learned from Marin Municipal Water District and Fire that we actually needed to look at the pressure and the flow of the hydrants. So on June 29th, we met MMWD out at the site, and they did do a flow and pressure test of all of the 3 hydrants. One's on Myrna, there are 2 on the Deer Park property. And so we have that information uploaded as well. We only have from MMWD the raw numbers of the pressure and flow from the June 29th reading. So those have been uploaded. And then also because there was some concern about the hydrants as well as the Michael Baker International, the board, the district, we contracted with DUDEC, which is let me just read it from here. It is a statewide expert in fire protection and planning and analysis for another review or assessment of the facilities. So when we talk, and you'll hear tonight about non-conforming, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the entity themselves, the Children's Center. It just has to do with the way that the property itself is categorized, because it is not, as of today, fully up to whatever code might be triggered based on whichever entity owns the property. So there are different requirements, and you'll hear more about this tonight, if the property is owned by the district. And then if we are successful, which I hope we will be, in making the sale or transfer to the Children's Center, then there are different requirements that they may be under if they are the property owners. And so we wanted more information about that. So later in tonight's presentation, we will have a review of the DUDEC report. And then also, as Shelley mentioned a little bit ago, at our last Thursday's Deer Park Working Group meeting, the Marin County Fire and Ross Valley Fire personnel joined us, and we went over, we had sent them the report ahead of time, and they were able to confirm at the meeting the accuracy of the report. And then they also talked about that the way that if there were to be a fire, it depends on what kind of fire, that would trigger how their approach is to related to fighting it. So if it's a aspect of the building itself, as opposed to what they might do should it be a wildfire, as an example. There are different elements there. And let's see, is there anything else? I think that's it on that one. And then related to the key findings from our fire safety. So as I mentioned, there are different elements as we're working through and learning about what's required. So there are elements. So this slide here is designed to show that different regulations apply depending on which entity owns the property and or which entity occupies the property. So there are annual fire inspections that is not required of the district per se, but it is of the operational aspect of the building and site related to the Children's Center's occupancy there. And so what they look at annually is, it's not a building inspection, but it's just an assessment of exits, operable fire extinguishers, extension cords. Our school district schools go through these annually as well. So this is just an inspection, and they give a report. The fire department gives a report as to what may need to get changed, like related to extension cord use and so on. And then there's oversight and approvals. So as the district is currently the property owner, then we have to go through DSA should there be certain upgrades. And then we are beholden to the state fire marshal related to any upgrades that occur while the district is in ownership. And then if the Children's Center is to become the owner, then they are subject to local planning, so Fairfax Town and Fire Departments, Ross Valley Fire and Marin County Fire would come into play for them. And then we have kind of what are the triggers in terms of fire safety system upgrades. So in terms of the district remaining in ownership, it's less than or equal to $100,000 of improvement costs. Oh, sorry, greater than, you're right. Greater than or equal to $100,000, and then use of public funds via state and federal grants. And then if the Children's Center, that is greater than or equal to 10% expansion, substantial remodel, change of or increased use of public funds via state or federal guidelines. So we're beholden to whatever we might be working through in terms of the upgrades. So again, the legal non-conforming aspects of just the property itself. So in terms of, it is currently Field Act compliant, based on whenever we had gone through any kind of upgrade as the district to the facility. It meets those requirements back then, but those aren't the same requirements that are in play today. And so according to these system upgrade triggers, then these aspects that are currently legally non-conforming would get triggered. And that would be like fire access roads and evacuation routes, hydrant pressure and flow, fire protection and suppression systems, flammability, and vegetation clearance. So that's what we mean in terms of the legal non-conforming. It's legal in its current state, but it is non-conforming in terms of whatever the current codes and requirements are.
And if I could just add one thing to that. There was a project that was DSA approved and went through the process at Deer Park, and I believe it was 2002. You can actually see that on the district website. I'm sorry, the state website. And it was to add a portable classroom.
At that time.
Or multiple portable classrooms. So,
okay, thank you.
And I think I have the next
You do.
one. And Teresa, this is where we need to switch over to the other presentation, that one. So this evening I have the opportunity to present on behalf of Jeremy Kahn. Unfortunately, the Jeremy Kahn, who put together the DUDEC report, was unable to be here this evening, and so he sends his apologies for that. But I did talk to him about his presentation and his memo, and this is his presentation this evening. So he has broken his memo and his presentation down into two distinct areas. And this is how he went about looking at the facility. The first had to do with the fire code review, and the second had to do with the wildfire risk analysis. And so as you go down the path of the fire code review, he was looking at the exterior of the facility and not the interior, because we know that the fire department had gone through and done their annual review as they do for all facilities, and they passed with everything. So they were looking at just the exterior. And the first thing that they were looking at had to do with the required fire flow. And this had to do mainly with the water supply. And so you can see here an approved water supply capable of supplying the required fire flow for protection shall be provided to premises on which facilities, buildings, or portions of buildings are hereafter constructed or moved, etc. And the reason for this is to ensure that when he's looking at it, that the smallest and largest building, individual buildings, that there's sufficient fire flow, fire water pressure to be able to put that fire out, and that's what this is referring to.
I was just going to clarify, when you hear the term fire flow, that's a fire term, and it's a combination of pressure and gallons per minute that comes out of a hydrant. So fire flow is the combination of those two. It's a jargon word that just thought I'd clarify.
And so as he was looking at it, he looked at where are the fire hydrants located in relation to the Deer Park property. And there are two fire hydrants located on the actual Deer Park property. They're listed in red as red dots on here. And then there is one additional that's just outside the park that's actually at the corner of Myrna. And so you can see where the 1, 2, and 3 are on the photo, and that's where each of those fire hydrants are located. So, yeah. In terms of our fire apparatus access roads, the next thing that he was looking at, in addition to the fire hydrants, is the access roads. And this is important for this particular site because as we look at the Deer Park site, there's only one way in and out, really, to the area. And so it's really critical that everything meet the proper apparatus access road. And what they mean by apparatus access road is, are they able to get a fire truck through there with proper clearances? So when they're talking apparatus, they mean the fire truck. And so there's several parts of that are really critical. Number one, they're looking at, is there sufficient road access through Porteous? And then they're also looking at, is there sufficient road access through Deer Park all the way back to the school that's in the back? And then what they're looking at is the turnaround inside the park at that point. And what he found is that On Porteous, although there's a fair amount of space, it's difficult if you have cars parked, and as people start to flee the area, should there be a fire, there's really only the ability for one vehicle to get through at a time. So that was a concern for him. In terms of the actual, Deer Park Drive, what he found is that it was less than the required distance or width for the vehicles to go through in terms of the bridge area. It was less than 20 feet. And then the other part of that is, in terms of the circular turn at the end, is that particular drive is so deteriorated that it would not meet the current standards. And so he made note of that as well. So those were three concerns when looking at the fire apparatus access. And in terms of this, what he's just showing you is the width of the entrance to the park. And so you can see here that it doesn't meet the 20 feet. And that's really where he was looking. This is a particular map that is actually on the Marin County Fire Department website, and it is a map that shows all of the fire hydrants and basically the fire flow for the entire area of Deer Park. So he just pointed this out. And so that, in terms of the fire access, that was his biggest concern, is just that it would be really difficult for the fire apparatus to get back to the park if there was a fire back there. The next concern that he had, or area that he was looking at, let me rephrase that, is the wildfire risk analysis. And so this particular map, which he provided in the report, it shows all of the fires within the recorded fire history since about 1900 in the area around San Anselmo and Fairfax. And during that time, we've had in excess of 40 fires. And what's important to note is there was one major fire that went into the Deer Park area. And so the one thing that he pointed out to me is that that's really actually quite a large number for an area such as this. And so it's basically about one fire every 3 years, roughly, just in the general area, which is pretty extensive. It's not entirely unexpected, though, when you live in an area that is open like ours. But so when he was looking at the wildfire risk, the first thing he did is walk around the exterior of the campus, and he noted some issues. So for example, on the left, you see all of the leaves as well as the vegetation that starts to come down. The middle picture, you can see that the clearance between the buildings and the trees is quite narrow. And then the picture to the right, you can see that there's actually items that are flammable that are right next to the building. And so, in terms of the wildfire risk analysis, the fire behavior modeling, so the next thing that he did is he looked at what would happen if we had a fire. So what he mentioned to me is that first and foremost, the main period of fires for this area is June to October. And so when looking at the weather patterns during that time, you can see that he's modeled 3 different potential fires in that area. And you can see that the fire, if it happened, would move towards the park. If it happened near Porteous, it would move back towards the school. And if it happened just in the park, it would potentially move up the hill. It depends on the wind patterns, but those are some of the things that he had noted. And those could be a little concerning, in particular since the only way in and out of there is basically through those areas. So that was a thing that was a little concerning, especially when you look at how close those things were to the buildings in terms of potential fire and different things that could ignite. The other thing that he was noting, and you don't see pictures on it, is that when looking at the buildings themselves, there were a lot of things that, in terms of the buildings and how they were built, which could be a little problematic if you had a fire. Not a little, would be problematic if you had a fire. Number one he was talking about was the roof system itself. Isn't necessarily flame resistant. And then there were some other things that he was talking about. For example, the vents were opened and you could get sparks that would go into them through that. And then just in general, we had a lot of, the buildings are old, you've got wood that's exposed, and those things could ignite as well. So he was talking about the structures themselves. So that was really one of the things that he was mentioning as well. And so when looking at it, he had talked about the wildfire behavior modeling and just in general that it's kind of in a really exposed area. And I think that's his last slide, but he did leave on one other note, and I think he talked about this in the report as well. There are things that you can do to help mitigate it. It doesn't eliminate the issues altogether. Number one would be to clear the debris near the buildings from that photo. You could do things like clear the grass and remove trees, because what was noted is that those trees, some at one point were about 15 feet away, which doesn't meet the defensible space area. And you could look at doing things like putting new roofs on that are more flame resistant. And then in terms of the actual building, he noted you could do things to help reduce the risk with especially the things like the fire flow issues and the water pressure in gallons per minute. You could put things on your buildings such as sprinklers, and you could also look potentially to replace the buildings, but obviously that there's a cost associated with those last two. But those were the things that he was pointing out could be mitigating factors to help with the fire on the site. But overall, that was pretty much what was within his report. And I don't know if there's anything you'd like to.
Since we've got a couple different sections to tonight's presentation, I thought we would, the way that we run our meetings is that we have presentation, and then we have time for the board to ask clarifying questions or some of initial questions that are just kind of fact-based kind of questions, or what does fire flow mean or something like that. So we'll do that periodically through this presentation if the trustees have any questions, and then we'll go out to the community for public comment, and then we'll bring it back here for discussion. So I think this is one of those times where we were going to pause to see, and we're missing 2 trustees tonight, so we can ask our questions, but I'm imagining at the next meeting we'll also want to give them an opportunity to ask questions as well. So if something comes up after tonight, but we want to pause here to see.
If I could add one thing before you go to that, those pictures that were part of that report, those were taken by Mr. Kahn in June, so those were recent photos.
And they were from his when he went, because he went and did a site visit.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Rachel or Wesley, Ryan, if you had any specific questions. I know all the details are in the report.
So I did want to ask, are you going to discuss more about the 7-Eleven process? And
Yeah, we're gonna go on in the presentation, but I just said if you had any clarifying questions or anything like that right now, we could do that. But if there aren't any other clarifying questions, please hold. We're going to do public comment, so if you want to note that down and bring it up, that would be great to bring it up, and then we are going to bring it back to the board after public comment, so we will bring it back, but definitely for the whole thing. Yeah, for the whole thing, we'll bring it back to the board and we can discuss all of this. Do you have any clarification questions, or if not, we can keep going?
I did have a question on that. the recent the history, fire history, the one that's circling the property on Bald Hill. Do we know when that was? It seems like it's red, but it's orange. You know what slide I'm talking about, Chris?
I do know which one you're talking about.
Is that?
I don't remember the exact year. It's listed in the report, though.
Yeah, that one. But in general, are the circles supposed to correlate with the date that
the circles are supposed to correlate with the actual fire, the area of the fire.
So am I right to see that the orange is the most recent that we have, the darker orange, which would be the one that's just northeast of our site on the other side of the hill? Is that right?
I don't know if it's correlated with the year. I think it has to do with the fire area.
Right. What I'm saying is, are the circles determining the date? I got it right.
Yeah,
here.
and it's hard to see without direct internet to be able to look at it. But when I did look at the report when we received it last week, that is what I viewed. We'd have to get clarification from Jeremy on that, but that's because it's more clear when you can see it directly online through the report.
Okay.
But that's how I took that as well, yeah.
It's the black dot in the middle. That's what I was asking, and I don't have clarification on that. That's what I was trying to figure out.
Let's check in with Jeremy on the date
exact
question exactly on this one side then. Okay. All right. Anything else that we want to bring back, either that can be answered or that we want to get clarification or?
I had one more question for Chris on the fire hydrants. On that first one, we noted the 1, 2, and 3. I believe it's slide number 5. Do you see that, Chris?
Yes.
Do you see I'm assuming that the red dots are the fire hydrants, and then the orange dots are also fire hydrants. Is that correct?
The 1, the 2, and the 3 are the fire hydrants. There is a third dot.
Yeah, what is that?
That is actually where the MWD box is. It's an underground box. It's not a fire hydrant, though.
So the dots aren't necessarily a correlation to an actual hydrant that you could put a hose on?
The red dot that doesn't have a number on it, that is actually a dot with a circle around it, which is hard to see unless you're looking directly at the report.
Okay, I see
Yeah.
that. What does that represent?
There's an actual MWD underground box that has their water coming into the park, and then from there it goes off, and right next to it is our backflow, which would then
So
be
it's
the water.
not a fire
Correct.
exit. Okay.
No, there is water there.
Got it.
There's a 4-inch pipe there.
Right.
But once it leaves that area, it goes into our backflow and then goes back into
Okay.
the rest of the school.
Copy.
So the flow for those 3 fire hydrants was listed as being too low, according to that report. Am I correct on that?
They were not sufficient to be able to provide the required gallons per minute for the smallest building on the school site.
All 3 of them?
All 3 of them, including number 3. Number 3 had approximately 1,500 gallons per minute, and number 1 and 2 were right around 400 gallons per minute.
And what was required?
They needed, I want to say it was about 1,700 gallons per minute.
Is that something that MMWD can help increase the water flow for?
They are in the process of working to add another hydrant in the area. It is something that we just found out about at the last Deer Park Working Group meeting, and we reached out to the MMWD directly. We don't have clarification on where they're putting it, though. And
But isn't it about flow, not just a hydrant? It's pressure. Getting enough water to the site is inadequate.
It is, yeah.
And the whole area, I recall the whole area was that.
Correct.
Yeah. And let's see if Heidi, have you heard back from the MMWD personnel? No, not yet. Okay.
Is in this report where it talks about daisy chaining?
Yeah. Can you turn your, no worries.
Talking to you, Chris. No, I have not heard back from Andrew. And is this report the one that talked about daisy chaining to mitigate the fire flow?
That's what, at our meeting, what Fire Marshal Albert was
that's
talking
the fire
about.
department.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
not this report.
yeah, not in this report, and
Okay.
that's part of where on the slide I did a few back where whatever kind of fire is going on will determine how they approach fighting it. And so there would be the possibility of daisy chaining, as well as sometimes, depending on the size of the fire, there might be enough water on the apparatus itself. They don't actually have to start pumping. And then what I heard also, which those of you, Chris, Eric, Heidi, Shelley, and our two attorneys who were at the meeting, they talked about if there's an actual wildfire in the area, they probably wouldn't attempt to put that out. It would be more just suppressing as much as they could, because there would need to be other attempts to fight that type of a fire.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, just for future, Chris, can you put a note to find out what kind of water pressure they can put on it with the daisy chaining technique, please?
Daisy chaining doesn't increase the It doesn't increase the flow or the pressure.
Okay, great. Let's stay like that.
And there is an attachment uploaded as well that is the California Fire. If you look on the board documents, there's a California Fire Code Exhibit BB, which shows you the report references that exhibit, and it says what kind of building it is. It's a designation. So you'll see a column in that attachment, in the BB attachment, and there's a column for the type of building that it is that's referenced in the report, and that tells you for each size building what kind of pressure and gallons per minute is required for that size building.
So are we all confident of how much actual gallons per minute we can get to that site?
Well, we know what we can get.
Great.
We can get roughly 400 right. from numbers 1 and 2,
right.
and we can get approximately 1,500 from number 3. And the requirement for even the smallest building on that site would be 1,700 gallons per minute. Okay. So unless it's, yeah.
But the fire department said they didn't have a concern about that because of the way they fight fires, is what I understood him to say, that there wasn't a concern.
The way that I understood it, I mean, what they explained to us in our meeting was that they fight fires depending on what kind of fire it is. If it's a small fire in one room, they fight it this way. If it's a larger fire, they fight it a different way, so that they will fight it according to whatever kind of fire it is.
And they also said this report is not, it is related to the property, but this is not the code that the property is held to currently until there is upgrades made. So currently, the property is up to code. It is up to code currently.
It's not up to code, but it is legal. So that's what Marcy was mentioning with the legal non-conforming, is it doesn't conform to the current code, but you're legally able to occupy it and work within it, even if it doesn't conform to the current code.
However we want to say it, the fire department said it is up to code for how it stands now because of when it was built.
Let's not get tied up on logistics. We're just trying to say what legal is, what legal is not.
I just don't want the message out here that the building's not safe as it currently
No one said that. It's legal non-conforming.
I'm not saying that anyone said it. I'm just trying to say it.
I'm going to actually just say that this part was supposed to just stick to clarification questions of like how much water is here and what's the flow there. We'll bring it back and we can have further discussion once we bring it back. But I'm going to go ahead and see if there's. Do you have any other specific questions about the numbers and stuff? No. Okay. All right. Should we go on to the timeline? You're pointing, Chris. Oh, we're getting that back.
She was adding it. Okay. So there's your timeline.
All right. So the next part of our presentation is, as we had talked about last time, was starting to look at a timeline for moving our process forward. So what we did was back in early July, the staff had presented our working group with a rough overview of a timeline and the time that it would take to do facility improvements At that time, we were looking at the requirements that we have as a district under the Division of State Architecture, and that the improvements would need to have design and drawings and be approved through the Division of State Architecture. So staff had presented us with a rough timeline for that. And that timeline took about 12 months or so to get through the approval of the design process and to acquire the funding with the construction that would then happen afterwards. So that timeline was really just looking at the approval process, knowing that construction would happen afterwards. At our last working group meeting, Michael Calabrese, who's going to talk to us in a moment, had presented a timeline for the preferred alternative that we're working all towards now, which is a sale and transfer of the property to the Children's Center, and what would be involved and how long that might take. That timeline, which is the timeline that you can see, it's little teeny here, but we're going to show it big in a minute. That timeline went through about May. And again, these are our draft timelines. We just talked about this last Thursday. So we want to really get some kind of figure out what we're doing, and these are the draft timelines. So that timeline went through about May. So what we did was we took those two timelines kind of, as we were asked last time, I believe, from one of our trustees here, was to look at these three pathways, map them out on a timeline to get a sense of how long we're talking about, and are they all doable within a particular time frame. So that's the colored three pathways that you see up in the top. That, I know it's very teeny up here, but it is a document that you can link to on our board documents and view larger. Or you can actually, on this slide presentation, so if you look at the slide presentation online, you can click on one of those links up at the top to see greater details. But now we're going to have a presentation from Michael.
I think Heidi's going to do it.
Heidi's going to do it. Okay. So Heidi's going to talk about the timeline.
I will talk about the timeline. I'm sorry we don't have hard copies for everybody. Oh, well, there's a big copy right up there. Yeah. So I still can't see it. This timeline starts with the initiation of the 7-11 process, which would hopefully be around September 21st, 2022. The school board would direct the staff to initiate process, including seeking volunteers to serve on the committee. Next would be the appointment of the 7-11 committee, which would hopefully happen on 10/12/22. Responsible party would be Ross Valley School District. And this would allow 3 weeks to identify volunteers following the board's anticipated 9/21 decision to form the committee. Although there is no reason tentative recruitment efforts cannot begin earlier, the board may also select and give direction to staff or consultant to support the committee. Then next would be on 10/26, the 7-11 committee sets the schedule. The responsible parties would be the committee, meaning the 7-11 committee. We would expect the committee will hold an initial meeting at which it will adopt a schedule for further meetings and set a schedule for completing its various tasks. And then there would be 7-11 committee hearings, which would be November through December 22. And the 7-11 committee would be the responsible party. They must set a priority list of potential uses of surplus property that would be acceptable to the community, circulate lists in the community, and hold hearings. Specifically consider, quote, childcare development purposes pursuant to section 17-458, end quote. And then 7-11 committee report. RVSD board accepts report and gives further direction. That would be late in January 2023 up until, am I mixing those two ups? Oh, sorry. Okay, so the first one would be late into January 2023, which would be the committee, and they would deliver that report to the district. And then next, the district or the board accepts the report. That would hopefully be on the February 8th, 23 meeting. And that would be up to the district board. And we would anticipate this would be direction to make offers under Ed Code Section 17-489 as a precursor to transfer under Section 17-458. Next would be offer of property to Naylor Act entities. That would hopefully happen mid-February 2023. Responsible parties would be Ross Valley School District staff with board direction. Offers may be made at the same time, but the rights of offerees follow a priority list set by Ed Code 17489A. The Naylor Act offers expire mid-April 2023. The offerees would be Town of Fairfax, County Parks Authority, and County. Offerees have 60 days to decide per Ed Code Section 17489C. Transfer of property could happen May 2023. Ross Valley School District Board and Fairfax and Anselmo with assistance would be the responsible parties, and it assumes all steps prior according as occurred and described.
All right.
That's it.
Right. So this was all looking at like a timeline through May, knowing that it was all precipitating on kind of when it starts and how it goes. And so this is what we had looked at in our working group meeting last Thursday, was presented to the working group meeting last Thursday, and discussed it, and it seemed there wasn't a whole lot of questions, but it seemed like a reasonable timeline, I think, among all of us working group members. Since then, just since I know that this was one of the questions with our trustees, was exactly what does this process, some more looking into the details of it. Our attorney had put together a checklist of the process checklist, which mirrored this process, but just had a lot more, make sure we're checking off all the boxes as we go along. So I don't know how we're going to do.
And Terry texted me, he has had to step into another board's closed session, so he would like to have us come back to this item so we could move on to the Deer Park history update. Sorry, Teresa, for the confusion. Back to the presentation.
Sure.
And Chris, and then he'll text me when he's able to come back. And then
tonight?
Tonight, yes. Sorry.
Okay.
And then if he isn't able to make it, then we'll go through it.
Okay.
Or Michael can. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, great.
And so the next section is the Deer Park history update. And so one of the things that I did is I went through the boxes that we have historical documents, and I did find the 7-11 process that was done back in June of 1985. And so we did go through the 7-11 process. At that time, we had 2 sites that were unused. They were in vacant Red Hill and Deer Park, and so they were looking at those 2 sites. And so the benefit of this is it did allow for the governing board to make a determination as to how they were going to proceed with that particular site, Deer Park. And that's important to note because my next slide, and just an FYI, I do have that document linked so that we can anybody can access it from the presentation. The next part was that in 1988 there was an agreement that was made between RVSD and the Fairfax San Anselmo Children's Center for the sale and purchase of the site, and it was for the fair market value at the time of $550,000. And so what you have here is a copy of the board agenda with all the backup on it. And so there was an agreement for the sale of the property in 1988. Then in June of 1988, we came to an agreement in April. In June, there was a letter that was received from the Fairfax San Anselmo Children's Center Board of Directors, and it was pulling out of the deal. And it had to do with the reaction from the community as a whole. The community was worried about the access to the site. They were worried about the sale of the public asset, and also just the process itself in general. And so that's part of what's listed in the revocation from the Children's Center. So again, we had gone through and had an agreement in April, and in June of 1988 they pulled out. So those are the historical documents that we had within our files. The other thing that's important to note, I know I've moved on to the slide, but one of the things that we're continuing to do is go through those documents, and in the coming board meeting, we should have additional information, additional documents that we'll be providing to the governing board and to the public.
All right, thank you. And Terry's not back yet, so let me just do the real quick. The last slide is just a review of all of our board meeting information today, going back to May 10th, which was our first board meeting related to this item. So each of these items where there's the meeting agenda item and the meeting recording are linked to board docs as well as to our meeting recordings, and it has the minute to begin on the recording for this particular agendized item. And so without Terry being back.
Do you want me to go back to those slides?
Yeah. Without Terry being back to go through the checklist, and again, knowing that we also don't have two of our trustees up here who may want to have questions about the process, the more detailed questions about the process. I think the timeline, the checklist that Terry had put together mirrors the timeline that you guys just went through. It's just got more technical legal details about all the boxes that we have to check off. So I don't know if we need to go through. I think we should probably wait and go through that with Terry whenever.
Sure, it is posted in board
Yes.
docs as well, so
Right.
everybody will have a chance to review, and we could have it on next week's board meeting.
Yeah. So we'll just go ahead and move that back to next week's board meeting, and that'll give the trustees time to look at it in more detail, and anyone else in the public who wants to look at it in more detail, and then we can bring it back and talk to Terry about it and ask questions. So we'll take that's all the presentation material that we have for tonight. And I want to check in with the trustees to see if you have any clarification questions on the timeline information.
So I'm just going to hold all my 7-11 questions till we talk to Terry next week. Is that the next board meeting? Next week?
Yeah, unless you have any questions of the timeline that was presented.
No questions on the timeline.
Okay.
I was happy to see it though, so it looks good. Thank you.
Brian, do you have any clarifying or technical questions on anything that's?
No.
Okay. All right then. Is there anything else that the board, any other parts of the presentation that we need from the board? Or are we good on that part? Because we can then go out for public comment, and then we can bring it back to the board. Okay. So we're going to go out to, do we have the cards for public comment? Okay. Any other public comment cards that need to come up? Go ahead and bring them up. And while we're doing that, before we go out to public comment, I just wanted to make a couple of comments on what I had heard in some of our past board meetings in terms of the information that's been shared with us and the feelings that have been shared with us from our community. Just wanted to say a couple of things. First, I wanted to acknowledge that I may not be able to truly understand how many of you are feeling, but I do hear you, and I want to acknowledge how you're feeling, not just the content of the comments that are made, but also acknowledge the feelings that are here in this room. I've heard a lot of feelings of community members feeling othered and feeling isolated and separated from your neighbors in Fairfax and San Anselmo, and that in the child care center that you found teachers and caregivers and other families and companions and friends that share your lived experience and understand you in a way that makes the center a welcoming oasis and a lifeline of love and stability for you. And I just want you to know that I hear those feelings of connection. And I also acknowledge the fear and anxiety and anger that you felt when you were told that the center had been evicted or that we had given notice. And I heard that from you. And even though we haven't given notice to the center, those feelings are real. And I know that they continue to linger, even though we are working together. I feel very confident that we will be able to come to a resolution, but I also want to just acknowledge that those feelings are still there for many of you. I also acknowledge and hear frustration and anger. When you look up at the dais and at leaders up here who don't necessarily look like you or share your lived experiences, and yet we as representatives of our community do have the power to make decisions that impact your lives. And I hear the frustration and the fear and the anxiety that that can bring up. And I also acknowledge so I just wanted to acknowledge those feelings, because I know that what we do up here most of the time is talk about ideas and information and legal code and fire flow and buildings. So I just wanted to take a minute to also acknowledge the feelings in the room before we go on to public comment. Okay. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay. I will do my shuffling of public comments. I will take a drink so I can try and pronounce your names correctly. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read 5 names at a time, and if those 5 people could come up to our podium and make your public comment. So the first 5 people are Peggy Dodge, Jesse Estrada, Sharon Sagar, Maddie Tomsky, Alexis Robinson, 1, 2, 3, 4, and Bob Davison. And will you be my timekeeper again? So for those of you who have been here at all of our past meetings, we will continue on with the practice that we've had before. We'll do 3 minutes at the podium. You'll get a timer ring when you've got 30 seconds left, which means make your closing part of your comments. And welcome, Peggy.
Thank you. Do I need to do anything? Is this on? Okay. I'm Peggy Dodge, and I am a San Anselmo resident, parent of adult kids through the schools here in the Ross Valley. Also had attended Fairfax San Anselmo. I'm also an education professional. I want to thank you for your comments just now, Shelley, because I remembered some comments from last time where you were trying to ease the fear of the kids and families. And I think until there's actions that look like we're going to be able to preserve the Fairfax San Anselmo Children's Center at Deer Park, I know it's heartfelt on your part, but I don't know that it's really able to impact that fear of displacement that people have. Some of the actions, for example, that really don't add confidence have to do partly with this fire report thing that we just did. And, you know, it was represented initially, Marcy, that the Ross Valley Fire officials at your meeting confirmed the accuracy of the report. It's my understanding that's not exactly the situation. In other words, that I think there was some discussion before around, was it about how you fight a fire? But I think that that's still to be determined. And so I didn't get the sense that that they thought it was accurate. The other thing that I think is an issue is this market rate assessment. The money you're spending, the fact you just announced tonight, it'll be at least December before this market rate assessment is complete. As far as I know, it's not required by law. It's a non-sellable property in a certain way because of the zoning of the from the town, is my understanding. So, you know, take that with a grain of salt. But I just think that is another thing that keeps people feeling off balance and uncertain. The water flow issue, I think the improvements that are already scheduled are going to make a big difference on that. A lot of this stuff, the apparatus access and the wildfire risk, goes for the entire communities of Fairfax and San Anselmo, and the roofs, the wooden structures. I think Hidden Valley, White Hill, Red Hill, I think they meet. I think if you did that same study, you'd see the same concerns. So I just want to say, this feels like we're looking at Deer Park as one of your properties in a very specific way, in a very hypercritical way, that in the past you have said makes children unsafe there. Meanwhile, we have all these Ross Valley School District students at Hidden Valley and White Hill who are in buildings that are similar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jesse Estrada, and I came to the center about 13 years ago. My kids were 1 and 2. And through the years, the center has become quite a good place for us, a good place for my children. In all the time that I've been there, I volunteered with the men's group, and we worked on the center. We fixed things. I personally am a carpenter. Plumbers came in, tree cutters, gardeners, and we would get together once a month and we would clean the place up. Leaves, trees, branches, gutters, structural, I mean, you name it, we would do it. And that entire time, I always asked myself, hey, my landlord usually does this for me. Like, I don't have to do that. Like, my landlord comes in, if the toilet's broken, he fixes it. If the roof is leaking, he comes and fixes it. And that whole time, and I never said anything, and that whole time I always wondered, like, why, as I'm sure we pay a lot of money in rent, why does the owner of the property not do anything? I mean, not even as simple as a gardener to come and clean up the poison oak that the children can get into. The branches that fall after every single wind or rain, gutters that get full, you know, all of that stuff, rot that happens on every one of your houses, because I work at them. I work at your houses from time to time, all around here, San Anselmo, Ross, Fairfax. So it's all the same maintenance that you guys do to your houses that has been neglected on this property for how many years? And at the same time, of course, we haven't kept up with modern codes, but whose fault is that? Is that our fault that we haven't kept up with modern codes? Or is it the owner's fault that haven't helped us maybe continue? It's not like we're afraid to do the work. Eric could always round up people to do the work. There's never a shortage of people to donate their time for work. That's always what's gone through my mind. On a side note, my kids have already graduated from the center. I'm still pretty involved in the center. I still talk to Heidi and Eric on a regular basis. The teachers, I still talk to them. Love the teachers. Teachers that don't even teach there anymore are sitting here in the audience. The place is very special to a lot of people. It means something to me, it means something to everybody, but it's definitely a special place, and a place which in today's meeting looks like we're heading in the right direction. But I want to put that human touch to it, to let you know that there's people like me and everybody else in this line that this place affects. And it's not only now, it's the future. What about the kids in the future? I want them to have the same opportunities that my children had.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Sharon Sager, and I want to echo a couple of things that have been said. First of all, if you really want to build back the trust with the community, you really need to give us opportunities to see parts of this process that are happening offline. Because for me, the kind of reports that you're presenting tonight, I don't trust them, because they're not local people. They're not people I can ask questions of. I would like to hear from our local officials, which you're doing offline, and so I can't trust the process because I can't hear from the local people who know our community, who we could ask questions of and find out information. So that's part of the trust building process. Is you keep hiring all these people from who knows where. I probably can never trust this process, because the first thing that happened was someone cried wolf, and I don't trust it now, because I don't believe that there's really the safety issue that was brought up that all of a sudden created this issue of maybe having to evict somebody in 30 to 60 days. And the fact that you keep using that person will probably keep me from ever really trusting this process. That you can't find somebody that we can engage with, ask questions of, and who actually would come and educate you as a board. That still has not happened since March. You don't really understand the process of selling property. The community has not been able to hear the process of selling the community. We get the little bits and pieces of the conversations that happen here and there offline. So I think ultimately, to create the sense of trust with this community, you have to engage us. It's not just have us come sit here and listen to you talk and then you don't really engage with us. We're not having a conversation here. You're hearing from us, but we don't get responses from you. We don't get to hear from local people who can, give us answers. And, Ryan, you're laughing, but actually I engage with people in our community when I'm leading a meeting like this, and I answer questions. And I think our community deserves that opportunity. So have a workshop where we can ask questions and you can answer things and we can talk. But you keep setting up this process where, we're not engaging. We're listening to you. We're not feeling trusting because they're not people engaging in this process that we trust. And so, when you present a report that's talking about 90% of Fairfax, if my road is blocked, I'm out of luck too, because I'm not going to be able to evacuate my hill. If, Butterfield is blocked, then Hidden Valley's out of luck. How are you going to get, 700 kids off the White Hill campus if there's a fire in that valley? You're creating a sense of urgency and safety issues that exist everywhere in our community, and using that as the excuse to do something different. I, as a community member, want to know, why you wanted to sell this property in the first place, because that's, to me, what happened. You created a need to sell a property, and then you created the reason why. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Maddie Tomsky. I've been at the center for 27 years, and I'm now the lead, one of the lead preschool teachers there. I would like to ask you, what do we value? Compassion, equity, integrity, social justice? What are we trying to accomplish here? How can we all best support children's learning? Are we educating every student well? Not equally, but equitably. It's not a pie. Not everyone requires the same size piece. Yes, this approach requires an unequal distribution of resources to achieve equal outcomes, and this approach is for the betterment of our society. It benefits all people. Think about the future workforce. Educating everyone helps drive the economy in a positive way. Our country's economic well-being depends on this. Do we not all want every person to be informed and involved in the world around them, ultimately becoming contributing members of our society? All of our children, not just some, require their own type of support to grow and develop into innovative and collaborative individuals. We want for all children to live, work, and thrive in our world. If you fail to do a straight transfer of the property to the Fairfax San Anselmo Children's Centers, you would be directly contradicting your mission statement, which states, our mission is to provide the quality educational experience all students deserve, which is grounded in best practices, reflects the highest academic standards, and is responsive to community expectations. We keep the focus on our students, and we are committed to providing a program of academic excellence, cultural richness, social, emotional, and physical development that educates, supports, and challenges and inspires the whole child. So we are here to hold you accountable to your mission statement.
Hi, my name is Alexis Robinson. I am the board president for the Fairfax San Anselmo Children's Center. I'd like to share this quote from the California Department of Education's website, located under Rules and Responsibilities. The CDE's mission is to provide a world-class education for all students, from early childhood to adulthood. The CDE serves our state by innovating and collaborating with educators, schools, parents, and community partners, preparing students to live, work, and thrive in a highly connected world. The CDE's goals include establishing and fostering systems for school, home, and community resources that provides the physical, emotional, and intellectual support that each student needs to succeed. I'm going to say that again. Establishing and fostering systems for school, home, and community resources that provide the physical, emotional, and intellectual support that each student needs to succeed. That is Fairfax San Anselmo Children's Center and the Ross Valley School District working together. The center is the possibility of a world where parents, child care providers, and their early educators who support our children and their families live with dignity and respect, no matter their zip code or what they look like. Did you know that many parents have to choose between their job and their children's care? Let's work together to sustain a stable, community-based children's center who has provided a need in the Ross Valley school community for the past 49 years. Our society needs every child and every family to have access to quality early education regardless of their family income, race, or zip code. Everyone should have the ability to provide for and care for their families. Let's not be the ones to feed into the tragedy that early learning services for children are largely predetermined by the racial inequities of our society. We at the center are the ones to take a stand to knock down the barriers so that every family can have access to high quality, affordable childcare I invite the Ross Valley School District to stand with us and knock down those barriers.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Bob Davison. I have lived in Marin County for more than 50 years, and my taxes for all of those years have gone to support public education here in Marin County. For 35 years, I've lived across the street from the lower campus at Brookside. Both of my children went through Brookside, White Hill, and Archie Williams and public colleges. And thanks to the education they received, they're doing pretty well. I also have professionally been the executive director of large mental health nonprofits, and for 25 years worked as a management person in financial services here in Marin County. My perspective is perhaps a little different than some of the folks who are trying to convince you of the value to their children. I want you to know that the value to the economic system in Marin County depends on organizations like the Children's Center. Many of my employees would not be able to work for me if it wasn't for that center. I'm not the only person in that situation. There are lots of restaurants, construction companies, landscape companies, and other organizations here in the county that are in the same situation. And in my experience, when you really need to get something done, what you need is somebody to be a champion to make that happen. Whether that's financing for a large financial project through a bank, or whether that's getting funding from the state and or the county to take care of mental health clients. What I need from you personally is to say, I believe in this project. I believe in these parents. I believe in these students, and I'm going to do my damnedest to get through the administrative and legal hurdles that are going to be there to make it happen. So far, none of you has said that. And that's the reason people don't trust you. Because they think that your concern is risk management rather than the value of the education for the kids in our community, which is frankly upside down for the values that I worked for as a board member of the Yes Foundation. All I'm asking of you to do is to do your job, to say, I believe in education, I believe in the values of including everybody in our community, and I'm not terribly worried about risk management. Risk management is done by banks, and if I can figure out a way to get over the risk management as a manager of a financial institution, you sure as well can do it as a school board. Thank you.
All right, our next, I'm going to call up the next 6 because we've got 6 left. And you can go ahead and line up here too. Bill Madsen, Maya Estrada, Nicole Garcia, Olmec Estrada, Amaranta Silva, and Vicky Tenorio. All right, you've got same 3 minutes as everyone. We'll give a 30-second timer and then go ahead with the wrap up. Bill?
My name is Bill Madsen. I've lived on Porteous Avenue near the Children's Center for the last 27 years. I'm a firefighter. I've worked in fire prevention. I know the fire code. I just wanted to say a couple of things about, you talked about the Field Act, and you're talking about things that are legal non-conforming. If you look around, this building isn't sprinklered. It's legal non-conforming. Most buildings, the code cycle is every 3 years. They renew the codes every 3 years. So anything that hasn't been built in the last 5 years is probably legal non-conforming, everything. So you talk about the Field Act. The Field Act was 1933, and there have been no real updates to that. That's just to make sure you have reinforced concrete in your foundations. That's 30 code cycles out of compliance. The FSACC has been here for 50 years. That's about 20 code cycles that they could be out of compliance. And yeah, that the building's old, it's out of compliance, but it's legal, like you said, legal non-conforming, like every building practically in Fairfax. In that 50 years, you've been, not you personally, but the board of directors has been in charge of maintaining and stewarding that property. And it's been 50 years, and it doesn't sound like, if you're saying that the Field Act is the last thing that you the last standard you hold it to, that's 90 years old, and it was only built 50 or 70 years ago, and the Children's Center has been there for 50 years. But it doesn't sound like you've made any improvements in that time. And as stewards of the land, and as the landlords, especially with the safety that this has been used as a school in the same capacity. It's just not a public school. So what I'd like to see answered in the upcoming meetings are, what are your responsibilities? What happened in 1988? What led you to want to sell or agree to sell the property? We heard what made it fall through, but was it the same liability concerns of safety? There was the lease purchase program that you didn't hold Fairfax, Deer Park to. You didn't hold to the same standard as your other schools. There was the the 1998 Schools Act. You didn't make any improvements to the Deer Park then. So what, as stewards, in your position as the board of directors and as the school superintendent, what you're talking about liability. What were you thinking? What happened that you didn't make any improvements to the school in that time? That's my question I'd like to see answered in future meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Hello, I'm Maya Estrada. I'm 15 years old and I am at Archie Williams right now. I just wanted to say, first of all, like Peggy said, thank you, Ms. Hamilton, for your comments at the beginning. But I am concerned that your other board members don't share the same thoughts and sympathy for us. I don't want to speak on your behalf, but from my standpoint, as a literal child, that's how I feel. But this is my family. I attended the Fairfax San Anselmo Children's Center, and this has become my family over time. Across almost every Ross Valley school, probably, I see signs that say, "You're welcome here, you're accepted here." You even have one right here behind me that says, "You are welcome." I went to Wade Thomas and I went to Whitehill, but the sad reality behind that is that there's going to be kids like me that went to the center or who even didn't go to the center, of people of color, or just lower income people that don't feel welcome. It was the biggest struggle for me to feel welcome in the Ross Valley School District because I wasn't like every other kid. I didn't get nice big houses, or I didn't get the awesome like babysitters and nannies. I didn't get that. My parents worked extremely hard for me, and the center was the only resource that we had. It was crazy to me to hear anything about the center not being where it is. Just because you want to like move us or give us a second option, relocating us is going to take away so much. The place itself that the center is located is part of the family and the home and the environment. We have to stay in that location, or else I'm going to feel like, and I know that kids are going to feel like, it's not the same. But that's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, so my name is Omega Estrada, and I was wondering, where do I find the slideshow that you guys were showing on your website? Like, where is it exactly?
I will answer that, but I want to hear everybody, but I'm writing it down, so thank you.
Where is the slideshow? Where's the presentation? Ladies and gentlemen, Olmec Estrada, thank you so much. I gotta be proud of them. They're both my children. My name is Nicole Garcia Estrada. I am a former parent, a board member, a resident of San Anselmo, Upper Laurel, pretty fancy. I've been in this community for about 30 years, and I'm still shocked to see the lack of diversity from when I first arrived from Los Angeles, California. I came here 2 weeks before my school freshman year started at Drake at the time, now Archie. And it took me probably until my senior year when I left so quickly to feel any sort of comfort. My family was targeted on our street. My brother was followed home by the police based on the color of their skin. We are homeowners here. I struggle. I pay rent to live next door to my father and mother, to take care of them every day for the last 12 years, and I couldn't have done it if I didn't have the center. I did look for lots of places to put our children into when we had this happen to our family, and I couldn't afford any of them. So I had to stay with my newly issued master's degree in mental health at home until I was accepted because of the long wait list. And I did do a lot of volunteer work at that time, and just like my husband, Jesse, I often wondered, who are the landlords here? Because we are doing bake sales and dinners to go and really early mornings to do all the repairs to this building. And like I said, that's 12 years now. And it felt strange that there was just, no one to go to. So thank you, Ross Valley School District, for taking the money as long as you did and not turning around and doing anything. There was never a concern about fires. I know 3 years ago, I now work at Marin Housing Authority, so I deal with slumlords all the time. And I noticed 3 years ago, we were shut down because of an impending fire. There was no crisis meeting. We did not have a meeting by the board of directors for Ross Valley School District to talk about what we were gonna do to evacuate our children at that time. The schools were shut down, my work was shut down, and there was no emails, there was no talk, and there was no news about what we were gonna do. I'm a little concerned because, as some of the other folks have mentioned, the other schools only have one way in, one way out as well. All these things that you guys pointed out feel and smell like scare tactics to make us feel like there isn't a hidden agenda. And I would appreciate, in just observing the way that your board operates, to keep it professional, keep it classy, make us feel supported, don't laugh at us, and pay attention, because we are out here professionals and we're watching too.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Amaranta Silva. I'm a member of Parent Voices California. I'm a resident of Novato. And I'm here again to support this beautiful community. They already spoke tonight. They already give their comments saying that the center is the heart, not just of their families, their communities, and their lives. They share their stories where you can see that this is a direct attack to their community. Most of them pick up community, Black, Indigenous, colored people, low income, because 95% of the families that the center is serving, there are that kind of people that you're gonna put on that box, that you did on the moment that you released that statement, that they have like this eviction notice. You are saying that you didn't do it, but it was there. And you are saying that you acknowledge their feelings, their fears, but you are not doing anything about that. I don't see a statement. I don't see a public statement saying, we won't do that. We will stop this right there, and we'll start to work with the community. I don't see it. And I don't see on your actions that either. Like, you spend almost like half an hour, more than that, going through your fire report instead of offering a solution to that report, saying we're gonna change this, This is how we're going to work with the community. This is the renovations that we are planning for the center. We're spending all these meetings trying to convince you that you have to keep that center open, even when you know that it is the only center around this area that it serves low-income families. And you are telling me that that is not racist? I don't think that I'm the only one who has that on her mind. And it is really sad that you don't want to even acknowledge that you are doing that. You keep saying, we're not doing this. We're not attacking you. We're not putting this stress on your families and on your kids, but you are doing it. And I don't see solutions at the table. You have all these areas that you want to do, la, 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 la. But if you have the heart, if you really want to help this community, say, here is the list of renovations that we're going to do. This is your lease for the 5-10 years following, or this is the price for sale, something that is achievable for them. You did a sale years ago for the soccer area for $1, $1. And I don't see that on your options. I don't see a price that it is like actually accessible for these families and for the center. I'm just gonna end with your words on your website, and they're just words for you. You say you collaborate, you learn, you inspire, you mentor, and you believe. I don't believe on you. I don't see that you're collaborating with your community. I don't think you're learning from this experience. And you don't inspire me, and I don't think you can mentor any of this community. I'm sorry to say it like that clear, but if you try to close the center, we're not gonna allow you.
Thank you.
We are here to fight back. Every time that you attack our communities, we're gonna fight back. Every time that you attack our communities, we fight back. When you attack our communities, we fight back.
Thank you. Thank you.
Si quiere, dígame todo lo que quiere decir, yo lo puedo decir.
No.
Que pongas este lado y diga, háblame oído.
Yo soy Vicky Tenorio.
Hi, I'm Vicky Tenorio. I am a mother of Osvalde, of this district too. And I'm also a mother, the Parent Voices, that also take care of kids. And I feel that this night, I thought I was going to come here and hear a lot of good answers, but I'm still the same. I feel that I'm feeling with a lot of uncertainty. I need more answers from you, and I feel that the community is feeling the same way. This does not give us any security, any sense of a good feeling to any of the parents here. To be talking about more than a half hour about fires. And all the years that I was there, we never had a fire. We were in meetings with the district. And nothing was ever talked about a fire or possibility of a fire. So I feel that this is like a very short answer or like a very minimal answer. That we need more from you. We need more answers from you and better, faster answers. Because the fears continue there. The people that have uncertainty, that don't feel secure. We need the center, to continue serving for another 50 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and bring it back up to us for any, Any additional discussion, direction to the staff or to our legal counsel for our next board meeting to move forward? Any questions that we can answer? Real quick question. There was a technical question about where the presentation can be found. And the presentation, the way that the documents work for all of our board meetings is, you've probably heard Marcy mention board docs. So if you go to our the Ross Valley School District website, rossvalleyschools.org, and you go to the menu where it says board information, you can find information about us board members, but then you can go to the meetings section. And on that meetings page, help me if I'm missing something here, Marcy. On that meetings page is a link to board agendas and materials. And that will take you to the area of our website that we call board docs. The reason why this sounds complicated is that we need to create a historical record of all of our meetings and have our agendas posted publicly, and there's a lot of public process requirements for public agencies about when we post our boards, how we post our boards, and how we make information publicly available. So in that section of the board docs, you'll go to a place where it says meetings. It's in the upper right-hand corner. It'll say meetings, and if you click on that, you'll get a list of all of the board meetings for the past year or more. And then on the left-hand side, you'll click on the meeting date for this meeting. And you'll see the whole agenda for this meeting of everything that we discussed. We're going to talk about budgeted audited actuals afterwards, and all of those kinds of things. And if you click on the agenda item, all of those board materials will be in this particular agenda item. And this agenda item is it's in section D, presentation, and it's called Update from the Deer Park Working Group. So you'll look for that agenda item, and then all of the materials are posted there. And if you go right to the presentation, as we mentioned before, we've really tried to make it as easy as we can for people to access all of this information. As you've heard, it's a lot of complicated information, and we understand that. So we have put hyperlinks into the presentation to all of the materials that are referenced to help make it easy for you to find. So hopefully that will help those of you who want to find that. There's also a section on the presentation and on the board docs, not on the board docs, on the website, where you can see all of the recordings of the past meetings. So if you want to hear, for example, the presentation about slides 1 through 9, you can listen to the presentation from August 2nd meeting, and that'll be the more verbal description for those early slides. And if you have any questions, want to get any access, please let us know. Teresa, sorry to point over to you. Teresa's super helpful in our district office, and she can walk you through exactly what I just said and help you find any of that information on our website. We do want to make it available, transparent, let everybody know, and I know that it's a lot of information, so you're welcome to get in touch with us on that.
I think the only clarification is when you go to the date of the board meeting that you wish to view, when you click on that, it'll take you to a landing page for that. And then you'll drop down a little bit lower that says view the agenda. And then it'll pop up with what you described to be able to see all of the agenda items for that particular board meeting.
Okay. All right, so I'm bringing it back up here for any other kind of comments that the board trustees would like to make. I know I heard a couple of things that I, want to see if staff can bring back to us and for us. But I'm going to stop talking and see if you guys want to say something.
I did. There are some things that were important to me that I wanted to bring up. First of all, I want to tell y'all that I believe in this project. I believe in all these kids. I believe in all your families. And I believe that we're working to try and get this transfer through. So you may not have heard that explicitly from me, but that's where I stand on that. As far as the maintenance and upkeep of the building, I agree. I I think 30 years ago, they should have been making these updates. I think they should have been improving the buildings. I think before they did the 7-Eleven project, they should have decided they were either going to sell the building or they should have done something else with it. But personally, I think somebody, before I sat on the board, should have done something. They haven't. So here we are today. We're trying to work it out. We're trying to figure out how to get it over to you guys. So this isn't an issue for you guys going forward. I did want to ask, that's another question I had. Currently, we're not allowed to spend money on buildings that we're not really using, I believe, or not supposed to. I mean, I know we don't have spare funds to do these updates, but this transfer will allow you all to get grants and kind of hopefully update this. Okay, so the reason I personally am so interested in these fire reports, and yes, I know it's a long time, and I'm sorry you'll have to listen to that, but I do want to know the status of these things because it is our building still. It will hopefully be yours, but I would like to make sure that I understand what we are selling to another entity. Just so it's clear and everything's on the table and it's transparent. So for me, I want to make sure everyone knows everything's out on the table. I'm sorry, it takes a long time to get all that information out. But that's kind of where I am. I just wanted to make that statement and say, hey, I do want to help you guys. I think we're working towards it. I loved seeing that timeline there today. I loved seeing May 2023 as a timeline for this to be wrapping up. That makes me really happy. So I don't know if you have anything to say to that, but that's what I wanted to respond to tonight. I'm really just so thrilled to see that timeline.
We heard you. We knew. And we knew that was in the process and that we've been working on it. And part of working with the community through your leaders is we did initiate a process where we could work together. So we're working together, we're sharing information, we're looking at timelines, we're pulling information together as fast as we can. We're trying to find the resources and gather the information. And so I'm glad that we were able to all work together to pull all that those timelines together. So.
4 years ago when I was elected to this position, I made it a point to go to all the school sites that we manage on our school sites. I don't always like to ask the principal about the school. I like to go ask the janitor about the school. I like to ask the most tenured teachers about the school. I like to ask community members about the school because sometimes you don't get the answers from the people who are at the top responsible. But if you go to the people who clean up and you go to the people who are there after school, you learn everything you really need to know as a newcomer to that site. So after I finished touring all 5 of the schools that we currently went, I set up an interview with Eric and Heidi. And I walked in and have them show me everything about your site. Personally, I walked in, I took a ton of notes. I listened. I saw all those children. I grew up in this community too, and just because my skin color may not be the same as yours doesn't mean I don't care. I volunteer this time because I care. And I learned so much about your program. I learned about all the kids. I learned about all your teachers. I learned about all the sites. I asked what was the problems. I said, what do you need here? What do you have here? And I took the time to learn about it. And then I went back to the board and I came back and I told the board what I found. And there's not been one board member from the last board that I sat with to this board that I've sat with to any person I have ever met that has disparaged your program or your site for what it offers this community. And sometimes when we don't like the news or the process, we tend to put someone on the other side of the coin without understanding that without daylighting this process like this, we can't get to a solution. I've been a champion for solutions in this community. The goal is to bring people together. You can go back and look at notes. You can go back and look at my comments. And you can go back and look at my past actions. The goal is to find a way to make everyone in our community feel a part of our community. This process has been very important to daylight because it's high stakes stuff. Part of the stuff that we are responsible for trustees is not necessarily responsible to tenants and tenants' rights. It's responsible to the fiduciary responsibility of the rest of our school district for what we are challenged and what we are elected to do. This process has been very transparent, and sometimes I hear from people in this community that they feel that there's some secret backroom deal that we need to get rid of your program so we can do something else. And I'm here to look you all in the eyes and simply tell you that that is not true. We all volunteer our time for this community, not just for our kids, not just for our schools, but for the community. And I don't want to come off as seeing like I am any less caring than Shelley because I didn't make those kind of comments, but I've been making the type of comments that your program matters for years. I'm running another 4-year term because I care about your program and I care about this community. I don't have a lot of skin in this game. I don't gain anything from pushing an agenda because I have no agenda. I'm with the us agenda. I'm with a we agenda. For all of you who have been here, anyone who ever wants to ask me how I feel about any question in regard to this board, this school district, or myself, I am available. I have never turned down a question. I have never skirted a question. I can handle the difficult discussions with people because I care. So when you go back and you hear things that are scary and you don't know the news, that's okay. We all face those type of things. But please don't think that we are working against you, and please don't think we have an agenda. We have a financial responsibility to our community, and you are part of that. And you have a responsibility and skin in this game as well. And like I tell my children, and a lot of people that I work with, is we all have to be active participants in our own rescue. We all need help from others, but we have to take steps ourselves to improve our situation ourselves. And we do care. And together we can put up some great information and some great results, but it takes an us, not a we and a they.
Rachel, thanks, Ryan. I would just echo that. I mean, I think we chose to volunteer to sit up here because we care about our community. I think we all knew going into it that we were going to sit up here and have to make difficult decisions about complicated issues, and it's not comfortable. You know, tonight we talked about this fire safety information that is uncomfortable to acknowledge, and we don't take it lightly, and it's not an excuse, and it's not meant to scare or justify anything. And we're not doing it to inflict harm and anxiety, but it is something that we need to acknowledge as a piece of information in how we make our decisions. We might not make the same decisions, and that's okay. And we can find solutions where we don't have to make the same decisions, but we should have the same information and then choose what we want to do with that information. So we do need to acknowledge the current conditions of the facility so that we can all then have the same information to work from to address and improve the situation. And Rachel, I appreciate what you were saying in terms of having the fire information, having the timelines, having that information so that we can move forward. With respect to solutions, we are diligently working for solutions, and we have come up with a number of them. We didn't feature them as boldly tonight because one of our presentations we didn't go over. One of the solutions that we have agreed on is an exemption, the 17458, which we've all now memorized because we've talked about it. So one of the solutions that we have come up with is that there is an exemption in the Surplus Lands Act, which prioritizes childcare centers in surplusing land so that we can do a direct sale after we follow a couple of the other procedures, but we can then go to a direct sale as opposed to having to go out to an open bid. I think that's a great tangible solution that our working group has come up with. We have a preferred alternative, and I will say it is a preferred, I prefer that alternative. We are all working towards that solution. I believe in the center, and I believe that we are all working towards that preferred alternative, which is to do a direct sale to the center. I believe we're being reasonable and transparent and working together in that direction. So that is also a solution that we have come up with, is that preferred alternative. We know we're not there yet. We're not handing over the keys at this point. We can't make a sale decision until after the 7-Eleven committee process does its stuff that it does. So there are steps that we have to go through, that we are required to go through, that we are all going through on that process. Getting a timeline together, having that information is a solution. We didn't know what that was going to look like. I believe back in, when this first started, one of the first questions was, how long is this going to take? At that time we were talking about how long is it going to take to do the facility upgrades, or just to get the plans approved. How long is that going to take? We looked at how long it would take to get the plans approved. It wasn't the actual construction. But we now have part of that solution is a timeline. It adds stability to the process, and it has an end point to it, which I think also adds to what all of us were looking for. It gives some stability. It gives us a sense of an end date. It's what we knew we needed to come up with, is a reasonable time that this would end. And along those lines, I know that on one of the slides, and I know that we have heard from the Children's Center about stability of occupancy through this process. So I would like to see if we could ask staff to come back to the next meeting, maybe work with our attorneys to figure out what that would look like, to give your families, to give your students, children, that sense of security for this time while we're working on this, that you know that your occupancy is stable, that we're not interested in changing that as we work through this, with the idea that at the end, it's no longer leased. The ownership is changed, and we move forward with that. So that what we can do to create that occupancy stability for you, with that, knowing that then that whole arrangement with the lease goes away afterwards, because as of May or June, July, August, those last 3 months or whatever. So if we could work on that and bring it back next time, I think that would help and go a long way. I heard a question about, or I heard a couple people make comments about who is responsible for maintenance and upkeep of the buildings. I know we have started our process of pulling together historical records, and Rachel, you had mentioned, we weren't sitting in these seats that long ago, actually, the three of us. So we're still looking back at those historical records of who is responsible for what kind of maintenance has been done, by whom, when, how did that go? So I think staff, if you could continue to pull that out. I think that'll be important for our 7-Eleven committee process and for looking at the conditions of the property. There's a part of me that hesitates to look back because I really want to just look forward. I don't know that I want to look back and say, oh, you should have been doing this and you should have been doing this. I kind of just want to look forward and say, let's just look forward. But I do think it will be important information for understanding the property. And then the final thing that I want to say about the fire information and understanding it. I spent 9 years on the Planning Commission in Fairfax with Bill Madsen on the Planning Commission together. I have been a landlord for a nonprofit organization that purchased a school from the Miller Creek School District, Skyview Terrace property, and managed it as the landlord for 13 years as executive director, putting on roofs, new floors, being a landlord to a nonprofit. So I understand what legal non-conforming means, and I understand that you can legally occupy the building, and that, yes, all buildings are unique, and all buildings have different levels of conformity and non-conformity. My concern is the safety and welfare of the occupants inside the building. And the report that we got, we can, when we talk to, the report that we got is just, here's the conditions and here's some recommendations. It's up to us, it's up to you to figure out what to do with those conditions and recommendations. But some of the urgency that you might hear is that I don't want to sit around and wait for when, not if, something might happen. I want to, because I think for far too long, a lot of public boards turn a blind eye to reports like this and don't do anything. And I don't want to be one of those people who didn't do something and something happens. So I really care, and I think this is going to take the whole community to work together, not just in the sale transfer process. That's, I won't say the beginning of the process, but it's not the end of the process. And I am encouraged by the amount of outpouring of support and interest and attention and community that has come around this issue. And I feel optimistic that that will continue beyond this particular conversation that we're having. I really hope it does, because it's going to take money, it's going to take expertise, it's going to take construction, it's going to take owning a building and all of that maintenance and everything. It's going to take a lot. It's going to take a whole community. So I'm really encouraged that all of this energy can continue to move forward to support the center through, into, during, and through and beyond for the long haul, and not just at these board meetings. So that's my hope for the future, because I believe in this process. I believe in the center and what you do. I believe in the families and the children who are here. And I think we will, so that's all I'm going to say. Thank you. Is there anything else that staff needs?
I think I just want some clarification. So, Rachel, when you were talking about, you had said that there was a question in there, and what I heard you ask or start to ask about was something that happened historically. And so can you clarify a little bit so that we know what we're looking for, or what more information you need is kind of what I thought you were going to start to say.
It's more information about like the 7-Eleven and when it was done in 1988 or whatever that year was. I don't know if that's a sale. It must have been 1985. I'm not sure of the timing. Yeah. But I wanted to know, like, does this, I guess it's mostly just questions about 7-Eleven process that I was going to wait for Terry, I guess. But it's just kind of like, where did that fall? What timing wise?
I think when you look at that timeline, it has, just as far as the timeline goes, I think that
I think
is
so
in
too.
there, and how that works.
Okay.
Yeah.
The board needs to take action to adopt a resolution for commissioning a 7-Eleven committee. And so in accordance with the timeline that Eric was just referring to, it's going to be coming up soon in terms of the board meetings that we have set. Okay. Yeah. But I think we can do it within our regularly scheduled board meetings, but we may have to schedule a special meeting potentially at some point through this, given that we don't always have 2 meetings in a month. So we may have to schedule a special sometime throughout this.
Would it also maybe be possible for us to if we have to do a special session, is it possible to do like a workshop beforehand so people can ask us questions? Can people ask us and we can interact at workshops? Is that allowed? No, we haven't really done more than anything like a financial workshop since I've been on the board.
Workshops, there are different ways of structuring meetings. There are, certainly, if people just have technical questions, we can answer those questions through emails and letters and phone calls. As Ryan had said, you're always welcome to get in touch with us. Either I will answer a phone call. If I have answered several of them, if somebody said, hey, I just want to have a question about something that you said, can we have a conversation? Happy to do that, and answer things by emails and things like that. My understanding of workshops tend to be more done when there's like a design charrette, where you're actually kind of co-designing. When I've done it with buildings and architecture processes, it's in the very beginning when you're trying to co-design a space together, like should the bathroom be closer to this thing over here, or you're putting ideas and those kinds of things together in terms of a workshop. I think we've got a good pathway and solution that we're going towards. So sometimes they're also used when you're trying to figure out let's get all the ideas for solutions on the table before we, pick one to focus on. Mm-hmm. So I don't think we're at that point either, but we can talk to staff and see what we might be able to do. We might be able to set up an informal Q&A type of thing if people wanted to informally ask questions of a board member or so before a meeting, that it wouldn't be part of a formal meeting, but maybe a Q&A if that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, just like I want people to feel like they can ask questions and not like they're just saying stuff at a public moment and not getting
kind of like an office hours,
yeah,
kind of really,
this
open
format
house.
Is really difficult, but I want people to know that we're approachable and you can ask questions, and if we don't know, we'll get the answers. We're not here to hide anything, so.
If I can weigh in there.
Okay.
Did I interrupt?
No.
Were you done? I think that's a great idea, because I take notes on every person who comes up and comments on every meeting all the time, and I stash them away. And a lot of times I have a lot of questions at the end of these comments, and I wish that I had the ability to just stop the questioning, answer with what's factual, and throw back some information. So I actually think some sort of ability to be able to speak a little more freely and tell them where you're coming from and what you're thinking in regard to some of this may actually alleviate a lot of this pressure and may open the transparency and allow people to realize there are things we can say and we cannot say. I was asked in the IJ endorsement today how I weighed in on this whole thing, and I can't tell them you can't establish what you think, because then you remove your ability to vote on it if it comes to it. So there are things we can say and we can't say, but there's a lot of concerns that I hear in these notes that can be easily addressed with a question offline. And I encourage people, if they have those questions, not to hold them in and just come ask, because it should alleviate, I think, a lot of pressure.
So I'm hearing something that's a more informal Q&A that maybe isn't part of the formal process, and we can figure out how that might happen, like before a board meeting or something. We'll talk to the staff about what that might look like. Okay. Anything else? Any other staff direction or information? Nope. Okay. So we have another meeting next week, believe it or not. It's coming right up. So we will have another board meeting next week on Wednesday.
That is our first meeting where we move to Wednesdays. Yeah, so the 21st.
Okay.
And the agenda will still go live this Friday. Or the 21st. Yeah.
So the agenda for next Wednesday will go live this Friday, and then we're having another meeting next Wednesday. So we'll bring some of this information back. We'll let you know kind of where we are in the process on that. We may refine the timelines given where we are in the month and that kind of thing. So we'll just continue to do the updates, let you know where we are on getting all of that information, and keep moving forward. All right. Okay, thank you. I will take a very brief, hopefully just 5-minute recess for anybody who is going to go ahead and move on with their evening, and we will go on to our other agenda items, which are approval of unaudited financials, and another resolution. So we're going to go ahead, just a 3-minute, just a very short break. All right, it is 9:35 and we are reconvening from that short break. And moving on to item D2, which is the recommended approval of the 2021-22 unaudited actuals financial report.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening on our unaudited actuals. This is the completion of the 21-22 financial statements. Basically, we have a financial statement that we provide to the governing board every 3 months, and this is the last one where we're closing our books for the last school year. And so it would help if I turned this on. So what we have this evening here is just showing what our fund balances are as we look at it between our second interim budget and how we actually closed our books. And this is our total general fund. And when you look at it, we did have a $2.1 million gain in terms of our total general fund. You see that down at the bottom in the actual revenues and expense column. And you can see how we compared versus our second interim budget. And, one of the major reasons for this is still the COVID shutdown. And I know that we were not shut down last school year. However, because of the COVID shutdown in 1920, and then in 2021, when we were not back to normal school, we did not take attendance as a state and as a school district under the normal circumstances. So they continue to fund us in the 21-22 school year based upon our 1920 attendance. And one of the things that we did note is a pretty substantial decrease in our enrollment and subsequent our attendance, because there's a direct tie to enrollment and attendance. And that's how we get funded through the local control funding formula. So that's the reason for that. It will eventually switch, and we'll talk about those things later on, but I wanted to point that out. This is looking at our financial statements. 21-22 is how we're closing our books. And then the other 3 years are the current budget, what it would look like, and then moving forward. And that has to do with the revenues and the expenses for each of those. And it's showing our restricted ending balances as well as the 10% set aside, which is we have the 3% required minimum reserve on the unrestricted fund balance, but then the governing board has a policy that we would have an additional 7%, so a total of 10% reserve on the unrestricted side. So you see that set aside in our budget. And so when looking at it, we still are above our fund balance as we move forward, but we do have a deficit as you move into those out years. And that is a direct result of those, the change in the funding going, when we lose that COVID enrollment and attendance set aside. And when looking at it, one of the questions that often will come up is, what is your ending fund balance? And it's always, you have to do it in terms of your unrestricted fund balance, because that's what the true number is looked at, and you have to have 3% at a minimum. And again, the governing board has a set aside requirement of an additional 7%. So we have a 10% requirement. And in 21-22, we do have a 26.58%, roughly 26.6%. We do expect, based upon our preliminary adopted budget, to have an increase in our reserve slightly at the end of this next year. But then you notice that it's starting to drop, and that is a direct result of us, once again, being funded based upon our enrollment and attendance once the COVID set aside is removed. And so that's that cliff we've been talking about, and so you do see it. And this is the enrollment. So this really tells the story in terms of what has happened. So if you look in the 1920 year, our enrollment in October was just under 2040, so 2038. And then in 2021, 22, you see that we're roughly flat, but it's a pretty substantial drop in our enrollment. It's close to 270 children. And so that is a big loss of enrollment, a big loss of attendance, and a big loss as a direct result in our local control funding formula revenues, which is what is contributing to those figures that I was discussing. So just wanted to make everybody aware that there's a direct correlation. And so moving into the other funds, our cafeteria fund, it is a fund that does not normally pay for itself. We did have to contribute $85,000 this year to it to make it whole. And we're hoping that with the change in the universal meals for all, that will start to help change some of that. We'll see how that plays out. It's a little difficult when you're doing it initially, but we'll see how it impacts our numbers. We're hoping that it doesn't increase that, but we'll see as the year plays out. In deferred maintenance, that's our Fund 14. There's no longer the requirement to use this fund, so you no longer transfer a portion of your routine restricted maintenance to it, so you'll notice that our revenues are really small. Those are primarily interest income and other things. And so our expenses are $16,480, and so that particular fund is starting to drop. And so again, that's a fund that's no longer required to be used. Fund 25 is our capital facilities fund. This is the fund that is our developer fees. So anytime somebody pulls a permit to build a house or put an addition on their house that's larger than 500 or larger square feet, they have to pay a developer fee to the district. And that's what this is. And at the end of the year, we had $147,000 in those funds. Fund 35 is our state bond. It's labeled state bond funds. It's really the state modernization funds as well. That's another name for it. The reason it's relatively flat is we don't have any current projects, and that's just what's left over from previous. So we've got $1,000 in there, $1,129. Fund 40 is our special reserve for capital facilities. So if the governing board sets aside dollars for any projects out of the general fund, it would be in there. We got $301 in there. So, and with that, those are our major funds that we have, and it's really just a summary of what we have done, where we're at. Again, we have that $2.1 million total general fund change, and we have a reserve of 26.6% at the end of the year. And so it's been rather challenging year, as you all know, dealing with our budget just because of the COVID set aside and the large changes that we've been undertaking in terms of our budget, looking like we were going to be in community funded, potentially back out, looking like we're in, and does look like we're going to be out again based upon the really large increase in the COLA that came in with the June budget, which we talked about at the 45-day budget revision. But those are some of the minor challenges we've had, and it's been, from my perspective, a fun year. And I just want to say thank you to my staff who has helped a tremendous amount as well. I couldn't do it without them. So I need to just recognize all the hard work that they've done as well, because, I put together the final numbers, but they do the day-to-day operations. So, and with that, turn it over for any questions.
No, I just was that where you said we were kind of going to go into community funded and out of community, and I know the time frame out there. Are any of, and there's obviously still the fiscal cliff where the it is deficit spending, but we've got the reserves to go forward. Are any of those assumptions that we move into community funded? Are we pretty much in our current status quo all the way through all 4 years, or is there still some thought we might flip?
Everything that I've looked at with the county, and please understand that the FCMAT calculator that we use, which is the Fiscal Crisis Management and Assistance Team, because of the way that the governor put together the budget at the last minute, the county of the Marin County Office of Education has had to make a lot of the revisions. And so it's still one of those projects that is ongoing. So it's a wholesale change in that calculator. And so to the best of our abilities, not just mine, but also the County Office of Ed, it looks like, at least in terms of what our current projections are for cost of living and what our projections would be for our property taxes, the growth, it looks like we would stay in state aid moving forward. But eventually it will start to drop and minimize again the difference, simply because right now the COLA is so large with the inflationary rate, because it's based upon the consumer price index is how they judge the COLA. So right now, as long as we have a high consumer price index, that COLA growth is going to be high. Once that starts to taper back down to what has been our traditional normal range of COLA growth, then I would expect that to start to narrow again, because our property tax base has grown at a higher rate than the average COLAs over the last 2 decades. And so I would expect eventually for us to go back into a community funded district.
Any other questions? Okay. Any questions from the... Nope, no public comment, so we can bring it back for any other discussion. Or
the only thing I have to say is, after going to that meeting of the Marin County School Board Associations, thank you. That was one thing that came across every single table group I talked to. They were all like, "Who's your CEO? Are you happy with them?" And they were just, everybody was looking for one. So stay.
Well, I do have a small comment. I've always praised, your skill set specifically, but I want to remind this board that when I was here, my first couple of meetings 4 years ago, these numbers did not look the same. In fact, the last year of this term was supposed to be really scary on paper. And I remember looking at it going, gosh, what am I going to be doing in 4 years when this year comes? And then I just want to remind, us and the public and new board members that this is a moving target. And it's important to not get too high or too low on any of these reports, and just recognize that next month could be absolutely different. But it's also a tribute to having someone organized that can tell you, hey, this is this way, but don't get too comfy because this is where we might be headed. So having someone that can chart the way and keep us kind of in the middle is very helpful.
unless there's any other questions, we are addressing a recommended approval. So this is an action item, correct? Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the 21-22 unaudited actuals financial reports.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a second and a motion and a second, and we'll vote. Ryan?
Aye.
Rachel?
Aye.
And Shelley? Aye. Fantastic. All right, on to recommended approval of resolution 032223 to adopt the Gann limit. This looks familiar from last year.
Yeah, and it's also part of the other document because it is built into the state SACS forms. It's really a perfunctory task that the governing board is doing. Back many years ago, there was one of the legislators, Gann, put together some requirements that districts and government entities wouldn't spend more than a certain amount of tax revenues that come in, and the intent was to make sure that the state stays solvent as they move forward. And so really what this does is just calculates what the percentage growth that we could have in our total revenues, and it's something that's automatically calculated for us, and we're just approving it and then sending it on to the county and then ultimately the state. It gets built into their numbers.
Any questions or no public comment? I'm not seeing any public comment on this either, so I'll make a motion to approve the recommended, or make a motion to approve the resolution 03-22-23 to adopt the Gann limit.
Second.
All right, vote. Shelley, yes. Brian?
Aye.
Rachel?
Aye.
We have adopted our Gann limit. We are on now to consent actions. We have 3 consent actions up for this evening. Does anyone have any questions or need to do anything with these consent before moving them all together? I'm looking back and forth. Any public comment? No public comment out there, so.
I move consent.
You go.
Second.
Motion and a second. Let's take a vote. All right, Rachel.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Shelley, aye. Consent is moved. On to item F, board business. Committee updates and reports from trustees. Rachel, you took my report about the I didn't go to the meeting because I wasn't here, but I am part of the Marin County School Board Association. That's my normal committee. I do have a JLAC. I am also the second for the JLAC, which is the legislative committee, but that's, I think, tomorrow morning at 7:30. E2, actually they're both, they're back to back. The E2 committee is tomorrow at 7:30 to 8, and then the JLAC is from 7:30 to 8:30, and then the JLAC, which is the legislative, is 8:30 to 9:30, so that's what I'll be doing tomorrow morning. But I don't have anything to report on those committees, so you guys.
I know they were recruiting for E2 at that meeting.
Oh yes, they're always recruiting for E2. So if you'd like to, actually, I will say that Ross Valley School District is well represented on the E2 committee. If you look at, I was looking at the roster, I think there's like 15 or 16, and we've got four of us that tend to go. You go sometimes. You're on it. Ryan's on it. I'm on it. Marcy goes. Sometimes Marie. I don't know. Anyhow, but everyone is welcome. So
I'm not sure I can do 7:30 and get kids out the door.
It's the toughest time to make a meeting in the history of meetings.
When I'm awake, I'm just busy.
Do you have any committees?
I do, actually. I went to I had the Safe Routes to School meeting, and so those are always like cram-packed full of information. They did their parent kickoff luncheon on August 30th. They rolled out the program, kind of did a parent bonding, and shared best practices for the schools that they all work with. They were happy that there were a lot of improvements made on Butterfield, that corridor. They said they need some more parent volunteers at Brookside, but this was at their meeting on August 26th, so I'm not sure what they're at right now, if they've kind of bulked that up.
They have.
I've
been in communication with Judith.
Awesome. There was a lot of talk about e-bike safety and teenagers, and they've created flyers, and they're kind of trying to get out the information that various e-bikes are not recommended for certain ages. So they're doing a big push about that. They have a survey that's going out to people sometime in this coming week, so we should see that.
It's already out.
There we go. See, Marcy's on it. They're doing a new Street Smarts campaign, so I don't know if you remember seeing those, the banners that were on like light poles and things like that hanging up. They kind of updated all those, and so they kind of looked at all the data that they've had from recent history, and so they're kind of updating what the campaign is doing based on data. So there's new messaging, new platforms. They're kind of trying to minimize pedestrian collisions and biking collisions, because they said that those have the most severe injuries. So that's kind of what they're targeting now. And let's see what else. There was a Butterfield Road Committee report, and so they're making some changes there based on a survey that they did last year. And they're working on a concept for the crossing and crosswalks there. There was a bus update about the yellow bus. They made some changes to the afternoon routes. They've extended from Fairfax to Butterfield. They have 4 buses that are sold out. and that was beyond what they had expected initially from their past sales. So it was up from last year, which they were happy about. And let's see what else is interesting. In San Anselmo, there have been a lot of road marking, new striping. They're waiting to get reader feedback signals. So when people are speeding, like, it'll post up your actual speed to kind of slow people down. They're going to put a rapid flash crossing sign at the Woodside on Butterfield Crossing, because a lot of kids, they get the bus there, pick it up or drop it off, and so it's hard to get across there safely with people going back out to Sleepy Hollow. And there's 2 signal projects to separate Broadmoor Sierra intersection and that Saunders Avenue crossing system. They're going to replace the rapid flash there. So there's just like lots of ongoing projects that they've got going around locally to kind of improve safety for kids getting to and from school and just people around town. In Fairfax, there were some parents that spoke up about some of their experiences and about trying to improve areas with better visibility. And so they were going to work with the Fairfax people to kind of get that improved. So I think that's everything, hopefully. All right, thanks. You covered it.
Thanks. All right. We have approval of meeting minutes for August 23rd, but I don't think that we can do those because we don't have enough people because Ryan wasn't here. So we're going to have to move that. Right. And so we are going to need, I don't think, just because we need a quorum of people who were at the meeting.
Well, sometimes board members would go ahead and vote on something, but in our school district, they abstain when they did not attend a meeting because they weren't there to be participatory in the proceedings. So I think it's what I'm hearing Ryan say is he would abstain. So in that case, we only have two trustees remaining who are present at that meeting, and therefore we'll push it off to the September 21st meeting.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. All right, then we will move on to superintendent and cabinet updates.
All right, well, we only have Chris and me here this evening. Julia and Eric have the night off. So Chris, I'll just turn to you first. Are there any updates from the business services department, which includes maintenance of operations, food service, and of course, business?
We did get through the period where we did not have meals. From the lunch master. That took a tremendous amount of work from really the entire business services division as well as other district office staff. We had numerous people taking meals around the district. We had one of the days we even had a water main break, and one of our staff rode a bike with a bunch of the meals just to get them over to one school. It was what we could do, everything we could do to get meals everywhere. It was a challenging day. We were asking what else could go wrong, which we shouldn't ask because it did. But that was one thing that we were doing. In the last week, we also had a heat wave, so we've been working diligently on making sure our systems are functioning, our conditioning systems and all of that. And we'll be working even harder moving forward, ensuring that everything is up to date and have a proper PM program to ensure that preventative...
PM is preventative maintenance.
And I was just going to say that. Preventative maintenance program to ensure that we have everything up in place, and so we're working towards that. And it was actually something that the director and I were discussing last week, ensuring that we are moving forward doing that. So there's just lots and lots of things that happen and that that the department is working to address, and no 2 days are the same.
And can you give an update on Manners multipurpose room?
Yes. That was the other one, I'm sorry. So we had the issue with the termite damage, and we were able to get all of that addressed over the summer, with the exception of the painting. So if you had walked by the exterior of the multipurpose room during, as soon as school started, you would have noticed that it wasn't painted. And that was something that they did in the last week. They went through and they did paint it. They did it on a weekend so that it didn't disrupt the school. And we do now have that particular building fully operational, as well as fully sealed and the exterior maintained with the paint. So it was a lot of work, but we feel confident that we've addressed everything we needed to and worked really hard with our architect and our structural engineer and the contractor. And, it took a lot of people. And, I think that particular school and that particular building is now ready for our winter. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Chris. And I want to acknowledge Jorge to start off with this evening. This was supposed to be another practice run with Sean here, but unfortunately, Sean is back at the district office working on the internet and trying to get us up and running. And I tried to check a few minutes ago. We're not up yet, are we? No, unfortunately. Okay. So, Jorge, you did an amazing job. So these board meetings you've been practicing with, awesome. And so next week will be Jorge's second solo when we move to Wednesdays, because Sean is unable to attend board meetings as of right now on Tuesdays. So thank you, Jorge. Fantastic job. And of course, anytime we move a board meeting or even have it at the district office, the setup that goes into setting up chairs, all of the technology, Teresa schlepping all of the items that need, like the devices that we can't access internet with tonight, but yep. And all of that. So it's definitely a team effort to get these meetings set up. So huge appreciation to all involved, from the site custodial staff to district maintenance for getting the chair set up. And we'll again do what we can this evening to get everything broken down so that in the morning when Wade Thomas resumes its activities, that the multi will be available to the students and staff here on campus. So thank you for everything that you all do. Huge. And just as, there have been just some things that have happened this year that just keep us on our toes, improving procedures and practices. So whether it's, there was a water main break on Sir Francis Drake that wasn't involving any of our schools, but it definitely impacted. And then there was a water main break near the Hidden Valley campus not too long ago that then Des McKissick, our director of maintenance and operations, was working to get porta potties out there so that we could keep school functioning for the day. Chris purchased water for drinking so that the children could have, and the staff could have water there on the campus. But the staff at Hidden Valley didn't miss a beat. They kept going with their instruction, with the school's activities for the day. And then luckily it came on early in the day. So about 10:30, so it wasn't a huge impact. And then, of course, the heat wave last week. So, no, we had a couple of glitches with some air conditioning. But as Chris talked about, they're working on mitigating that so it doesn't happen in the future. And now we're in a cooling spell. So let's just hope for rain, because that is the next thing that we need. But we don't need last October's rain, which we all remember what happened then. And so just on a note, Lori Ross, our Human Resources Coordinator, is on vacation, but they've been able to hold some interviews, and right before she left, we held interviews, and unfortunately, so far, none of the folks who were offered positions have accepted. We're still waiting to hear back from one, so we'll continue to keep recruiting. Julia's been reaching out to area universities who are, to see if there might be any recent graduates or intern-eligible folks who we might be able to have come on board. But every district that, in terms of how they're responding, those programs who do respond, they're being asked by multiple school districts for the same kind of thing. So we may have a lead on one for our elementary PE opening, and we are also hoping, they held interviews today for elementary counselor, so we'll be waiting to hear from that. We definitely have a lot of still open classified positions, from food service workers to campus supervisors, instructional aides, special education program aides, one-to-one aides. There are definitely a number of openings, and we've had a vacant building manager position here at Wade Thomas for over a year. We did hold interviews, but unfortunately weren't able to fill it. And so we're very thankful for the agency. What is the name of that group who we contract with to provide? I forget. I know the name of the contact person, but yeah. All right. So we're just thankful for all the support that we get and the help. And then there are countless parent volunteers who are showing up at each of the school sites to help serve food and fill those vacant positions until we can actually get regular employees into those. So very thankful for the community effort to help get all of our schools and keep all of our schools up and running. And then we will be resuming our RVSD updates. So those are is our district office newsletter. We're looking to get our first edition out next week. We typically try to follow the week after a board meeting, but given everything that's been going on, we just haven't been able to get one going for this school year. But we'll be doing that. And then also working on all of the committee assignments that you all gave direction on that you are going to be participating in this year, whether they're district committees and or county-wide. So we're putting the dates in. And then you'll all get calendar invites for those. And then we have our first Parent Guardian Equity Task Force meeting coming up on September 29th. And so tonight I wasn't able to attend, but it was the planning meeting. So we're looking forward to meeting with all of our Parent Guardian Equity Task Force representatives at our meeting in September. And the last thing that I want to say is, you know how a few meetings ago that you all approved a substitute salary increase? So we thought that might hold us over for a little bit, but there is now a group of countywide superintendents, or we're working on it as a countywide superintendent group to look at trying to come up with something countywide so that it doesn't keep this going back and one-upping and that kind of thing to improve that. So we'll be bringing back information as that continues. So I think with that, that is it for this evening. And we'll be back next Wednesday for our next regularly scheduled board meeting.
All righty. Good segue into future board topics and board direction and all that kind of stuff. So we've got a meeting next Wednesday. Roughly, I know we don't know all of the agenda items because that evolves, but since it is next week, do we have a sense of, are there any other big things that are like, there's things that happen regularly or anything like that in terms of the meeting next week?
Don't think we have any critical deadlines that either human resources or business are needing to have for next week.
Okay.
We will be having our milestones, our employee milestones and employee introductions. We're tentatively looking to hold that at our board meeting in October.
Okay.
We were hoping that with as many open positions that we'd be able to have more folks to introduce to you then.
Okay. Any other final parting comments or notes? Thank you all for I know that this topic that we've had in terms of the Deer Park Working Group is a lot of additional work for staff. So I also want to just be appreciative. I know how much work you put in regularly, and then on top of that with preparing for these meetings and all of this information that we need to have. And just wanted to say thank you and appreciate all that extra work. And I know it will not, now that we have a timeline, it will not go on forever. And I think it will diminish as we continue to move. But thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you to Shelley for joining us in the Deer Park Working Group, because it is really important, I think, to have a trustee there for those meetings. And I would say, too, for any trustees, just thinking about a comment that I heard this evening, that I believe you all are up to speed in understanding the information that's being presented to you at each of these board meetings, but in the event that you also have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to staff or to help us to any of our presentations to know what additional information we need to start considering adding if you feel like any of the presentation materials are lacking in detail.
Yeah, I'm going to just dovetail off that because we are coming up to places where we are going to be needing to make some decisions. So this was really making sure we were gathering all the information that you need. So launching 7-Eleven committees, making decisions on those reports. So if there's anything else that's not showing up that you're going to need, we want to know about it so we can make sure that we get it in enough time for it to be thoughtfully considered as we will start having action items on those agenda items coming up here. So, all right, and with that, it is 10:10. Da-da! And I will call the meeting adjourned.